never be perfect. Your temple will never be perfect. You will always be working on it. There will always be challenges, and you must be prepared to face those more difficult times as well as the good times. And there are times you will be tired. There are times you may be burned out. And it's not necessarily bad to step back for a time, but not to the point that things fall apart. And I've seen people who just couldn't handle when things did not go well and totally stepped back and their groups fell apart. When you're in that situation where you are burned out, where you're tired, where you're just not quite sure how you're going to do it, then you need to work with spirit. You need to work with your guides, with your higher self, to gain the energy and the insight, and again, work with your shadow to help to address those emotions. One of the things we have in our lessons, we have a number of techniques given for bringing in greater energy into your system. So if you're feeling beaten down and tired and burned out, there are energetic ways to address that as well. But you must address it if you want to have a good outcome. I think that I'm very outcome-based in my attitudes. That years ago, there was a teacher. I did not study with this person, and I wasn't particularly given to their books. Lady Crystal did enjoy this person's books. His name was Sun Bear, and he had a saying, and he was a teacher of Native American spirituality. And his saying was, if it doesn't grow corn, why do you do it? Or in other words, if what you're doing is not going to have the result you want, you need to change what you're doing. If you're doing it just to be doing it, but it's not building what you need to change what you're doing. And you should never be afraid to change what you're doing if you need to. From 1979 and the tiny little familial Correllian tradition to today, we have changed so many things, some of which required taking chances, big chances, but we took them and we're here. And I've seen other people in similar positions who would not take chances, who would not make changes, who just dropped off on the sides. You have to be willing to do these things that are not always easy. I think of positions of leadership, or at least my own position, as being very much like being on a surfboard. You're constantly shifting with all of the movement underneath of you. And if you try to remain rigid, you're going to have problems. But if you can sway with the motion, and if you can follow where spirit is leading and make changes when they're needed, I think you have a much better outcome. It is important, I think, to be open always to the idea that there could be better ways of doing things than what you're already doing. And never to think you know everything there is to be known. The greatest enemy of effective leadership or authentic leadership is to think you already know everything there is to know. There will never be a point in this life in which you know everything there is to know. You may know a lot. You may know what you need to know for that situation, but there's always more to be learned. And sometimes those things that have served you well for years may become outdated because of changes in the people that you are serving, in the world that you live in. And an example of that, we mentioned in your introduction magazines that I had illustrated for back in the 80s. I illustrated for something like 90 different pagan magazines. There are no such publications today that I'm aware of. And if they are of very little importance. At that time, they were the primary means of communication. Today, the primary means of communication in the pagan community is what we're doing right here, right now. And taping a magazine master together with typing paper and Scotch tape, and then Xeroxing off to distribute at the local festival or metaphysical store really doesn't cut it today. There might be a role for it, but it certainly is not a major form of communication. To be where we are today, we had to change our form of communication many times and will continue to change it. Always to try to have the best form of communication, the best way of helping people to feel connected and united that we can find. I enjoyed making those magazines, those very handcrafted magazines. But I acknowledge it's not the thing to be doing now. Another example, Yahoo groups. How many people remember Yahoo groups? How many of our people remember when everything we did was on Yahoo groups? There came a point where we realized we must evolve beyond this. And we had such a fight on our hands from the people who loved Yahoo groups. Some people absolutely refused to leave them. But as a tradition, we advanced beyond them. And who is using Yahoo groups today? Had we refused to change, many of us would not know each other now. But we made it a point to go to that next. I see that Deb in the chat room mentions about.com. My weekly Chancellor's Chat, which I'm now doing through Zoom, began on about.com. And that was 1998. And if we had not grown beyond that platform, we might not know each other today. It was a wonderful platform while we used it. Our newly rebuilt site. We spent a lot of time, a lot of effort, and a lot of angst in rebuilding that site, because there were times where it just seemed like it was taking forever. The programmers could not understand what we needed, but we got it. But the old site was cutting edge in 2001. The person who designed it, Lisa Tuitt, had worked for Disney Corporation. She was a cutting edge programmer, and she made the best site imaginable in 2001. It is now 2020, and that site was really very bulky at this point. It had a lot of problems. It was frequently breaking. It had to be replaced. Had we not been willing to replace it, I think that we would be in a far more difficult situation than we are. As it is, most people love the new site. It certainly works better, even though, like all sites, it will have its problems. But it's not having as many problems as the old site had. Anytime you have a site that deep, you're going to have to be constantly watching it. Video, we do Magic TV and have been doing it now for many years. We have thousands of videos on Magic TV. And I have to tell you, doing the daily vlog can be a grind. There are times when I look at it and say, I don't want to do a vlog today. And I will admit in the last couple of years, I've given into that more often, but I come back to it because I really do love doing it, but I also feel like it's really important. I don't know of any other person in a comparable position to my own who will take virtually any question and answer it for posterity. For the present, but also for posterity because those videos will be there. I had a great compliment earlier this year when, having not done the vlog during the site rebuild, I brought it back. One of the comments that was made was that one of the viewers remarked on admiring the vlog because I would take anyone's question. And of course, I could take that in more than one ways too, but I believe it was a compliment. I would take it as a compliment even if it weren't meant as one, because that's actually exactly what I try to do. And all of those questions I have found to be worth answering. One of my greatest enjoyments in dealing with the vlog is when someone asks a question that I know others might meet with derision and might consider a silly question, but I can find important things in it. And this has happened many times over the years, and I I think that particular kind of question is instructive on more than one level, because so many people will dismiss a question or a situation because they have never thought of it before. I love when I'm told something I've never thought of before. I can only think of one or two questions to which my answer has ever been, yeah, that's silly, or no, no, we don't have a spell to turn you into a mermaid. But let me tell you about mermaids. Let me tell you about glamour. So there are things that could lead into. There are no really bad questions. And I think that this too is an important thing if you're going to be a leader, to understand when people come to you, you must meet them where you find them. This is one of my mother's favorite sayings. The people who come to your group may not be at the same educational level that you are. They may not have had the kind of experiences you have had. And consequently, they may ask questions that may seem silly to you, but that doesn't mean it's silly to them. And you need to remember what it was like to be young, what it was like to be new, and answer their questions sensibly and compassionately. And I've seen so many people in the wider pagan community who would be dismissive of people who asked what they thought were silly questions, when what they really needed to do were answer the questions. And this comes back to that idea that humility and modesty are part of being a decent leader. If someone comes to you and they're not at the same level you are, that doesn't mean you should treat them badly. Very few things should cause you to treat people with any level of severity. There are certain kinds of bad behavior that do warrant it, but even then, you should keep your emotion out of it and stick with the policies that your organization has. I had a lady ask a question yesterday about emotion, because she had experienced emotion often as a negative thing that caused her to overreact to situations. I certainly don't think that emotion is a negative thing. I do think that when you're in a position of leadership, you often have to keep your emotions out of it. One of my roles is as paramount grand deemster of the tradition, which means that very often, particularly in the past, if there was a question, a conflict or a question of wrongdoing that had to be resolved, it would end up on my desk to be resolved. And it was particularly important to keep emotion out of that and to focus on the policies that we had established. Has the person actually broken a rule? Has the person actually done something wrong, or is it a personality clash? And if the person has done something wrong, is it severe enough to merit removing them from the tradition, or can it be ameliorated? Can they make amends or simply change the way they behave and resolve the problem? And I'll give you an example of that, although we are coming close to the end of our time, but I'll give you an example of the kind of thing you might encounter as a leader at a certain level. Years ago, we had a young man who was the niece of or the nephew rather, of a prominent high priestess in the tradition. And he joined the tradition because his aunt was in it, and he thought it might be fun. Not long after, one of our temples on the opposite side of the country came into a huge conflict with this young man and accused him of fraud, because they claimed that he had the same craft name as one of their members. Now, when asked if he was that person, he readily said no. He was not trying to represent himself as that person. They happened to have the same craft name. Well, the nephew had done nothing wrong in accidentally having the same craft name as another person, although there's a little more to the story that will come. And I could not convince the temple head that, more than one person having the same craft name is not an act of fraud. It's not anything but a coincidence, and craft names are not copyrighted. If they were, we have about 300 Heathers in witch school who would be in trouble. We have a plethora of raven wolves who would be in trouble. People duplicate names all the time. Turns out that there was a person in the temple on the other side of the country who had been in a romantic relationship with this young man. And what they had done is they had merged their craft names. And when they separated, they did not uncouple them. They were both continuing to use the combined craft name that they had used when they were together. So part of what was going on was the result of a failed romance. But in the end, it was not possible to explain that this is not a violation of any of our rules. And the temple ended up leaving in a state of great angst. And to be honest, I wasn't sorry to see them go. But would you ever imagine that you would be called upon to adjudicate a question like that? And my judgment, obviously, again, was there are no rules broken here. It would have been wise, I think, if they would have uncoupled the combined craft name that was in dispute. But as the nephew pointed out, when he joined the tradition, he had not realized that there was any possibility that his ex-lover could possibly be in the same tradition. He didn't realize how large we were. I don't know that even today, many of our members fully understand just how global a tradition we are. But that's the kind of weird situation that does come up. And it was very important for me in dealing with the temple head who could not understand why I would not give them their way and just throw this young man out, that I not get angry, that rather I focus on the policies of our tradition. One of which is that, yes, more than one person can have the same craft name as long as they're not trying to pretend they're somebody else. So I believe that we may have come to the end of our time now. Am I correct?
Yes. Thank you so much, Reverend Don.
Thank you.
I truly appreciate it, and I know everybody else has truly appreciated it. You were absolutely fabulous, and I know everybody's got a lot of good nuggets from it. So
I hope that it was helpful.
So thank you so much.
Thank you.
Continue to inspire people and yourself, and also in your life and others. And blessed be.
Blessed be. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Now, I'm going to turn this over to Ebony, our co-host, Ebony Nash. Ebony?
I'm coming. Here we are. Hello, everyone. I hope you enjoyed that as much as I did. We are going to take about a 15-minute break now. And up next is an amazing, fabulous woman who lives a soulful life, Lady Reverend Nikki Kirby. Our 2020 Authentic Leadership Conference was brought to you by Ever Moving We Rise, Witton Shrine, and the Karelian Nativist tradition. Please find it in your hearts to provide our sponsors with your generous donation. We'll be right back. All right, live from Forest City, North Carolina, it's the 2020 Authentic Leadership Conference sponsored by the Karelia Nativist Tradition and Ever Moving with We Rise Shrine. I am your co-host, Reverend Ebony Nash. We are back. We ask that you share this broadcast with others so everyone will be able to have an opportunity to gain this insightful knowledge. Wasn't Lord Don insightful today? I would say that I definitely learned a lot, but the biggest thing that I learned and will take with me is if you think you can't, or you think you can, you're right. Now there's some deep knowledge right there. All right, everybody, are you ready for your next speaker? Please save your questions for after our speakers present. This fabulous lady I'm going to introduce knew life was not easy or always fair, and has been described as an energetic individual with broad vision. While working 40 plus hours each week, working with the severely mentally ill, she became class valedictorian, where she obtained her master's degree in entertainment business. Despite her efforts, she lost everything and became homeless in California while pursuing her dreams. It was then that she had a mind shift in which everything changed. Due to her personal journey and experience, she contains tremendous passion for helping others obtain their personal goals and discovering their purpose and passion in their current soul's life. She started the Laughing Soul Holistic Center, a business dedicated in helping people discover their purpose and passion while in alignment with spirit. And Moonlight Potions and Charms, an online provider of spiritual products designed to connect one with their spirituality. She created and teaches Living the Soulful Life, the Kicking the Janix Complex workshop, and created and writes for the Hummingbird Soul blog. As the founder and head of the Ever Moving We Rise Watan Shrine, she teaches the young phoenixes to be the next authentic leaders. She will be speaking on allowing the phoenix to rise. Put your hands together for the founder, organizer, and host of our 2020 Authentic Leadership Conference. I am proud to present to you Lady Reverend Nikki Kirby.
I can do anything. I've got strength of the soul. No one's gonna bend on me.
Hello, and how is everybody doing today? I am so glad and honored that I can be able to speak to you today. It's just such a privilege. American author Janet Finch said, and quote, "The phoenix must burn to emerge," unquote. As you align yourself with spirit, emerging and walking as your authentic self is a lifelong soulful journey full of passion, purpose, adventure, and peace. The question is, how do I get there? Although the answer is simple, the action one must take is not so easy, and most are not really willing to take. When we return to live again, the soul carries attachments with it. Two attachments are the conditioned self and the authentic self. So by default, we start acting as our ever-present conditioned self. So what is the conditioned self? It is the original way of how you see yourself. It is the part of you that tells you who you are and what you are about. By default, the soul operates from it. The conditioned self is shaped by all of our beliefs about us, our experiences, culture, and social influences. It tells you the story of you and your identity. The conditioned self is your underlying beliefs about yourself. So for instance, if you truly believe that you are a powerful and confident person, then you will act with confidence. But if you truly believe that you are a failure, then you will fail in everything you do. It consists of the work that you do, your education, your social status, your personal relations, your physical appearance, your religious beliefs, and much more. The conditioned self is based on our beliefs. So what is a belief? Well, the Oxford Dictionary defines a belief as, quote, trust, faith, or confidence in someone or something, unquote. What we believe about ourselves, or do we have more negative beliefs or positive beliefs? Do you believe that nothing you do is right, or do you believe that you are a powerful individual who can possess anything you want? Is your imagination limited or unlimited? Think about these things for a moment. So what are your true beliefs about yourself? Because the conditioned self's job is to keep you safe. The problem is the conditioned self is rarely truthful. It hates change and growth with a passion. We will do anything to keep any form or entity from changing your self-identity. Its sole objective is to defeat, avoid, or destroy by any means necessary to stop you from evolving. It uses deception, fear, and has you to come look for every opportunity to prove it right. The conditioned self does not want you to become aware of anything, especially yourself and your power. So what is it really doing is it's trapping you in your own suffering, decreasing your ability from fulfilling your soul's purpose and identity. So what is the authentic self? The motivational speaker Simon Sinek said, quote, authenticity is what we say and do the things you actually believe, unquote. Authenticity is important for your spiritual growth and your soul's journey, for it is the one thing that is ultimately true. Authenticity is something that there is just no way around it. It either is or it isn't. The conditioned self's opposite twin is the authentic self. This is you at your truest, purest form, and it's deep down, in the core. The authentic self is the one that will never lie or deceive you in any shape or manner. It is your soul's ultimate identity and destination, for it walks its talk and it is fearless. The authentic self is a part of you that strives to become more than you are, wants to grow, and it wants to be in spiritual alignment with one's spiritual path. It is the one that wants to take risk, love unconditionally, and lives life to the absolute fullest. It is the part of you that wants to start a new business, write that book, wants to speak out in front of a crowd, or wants to ask that special someone for a date. The authentic self is about discovering your life's passion and purpose and living it while being in alignment with spirit. This is a discovery and an enlightenment that are precious gifts spirit can give you. For instance, of not wanting to give up. Some people, they don't want to get up in the mornings to go to work. However, your authentic self actually wants you to jump out of bed and be ready to embrace and take on the day. Living life with purpose and passion brings a peace that many of us really truly crave for. But the peace is indescribable, for everyone contains a different view of peace. The authentic self does not become offended, for it is above all of the issues, entities, and matters that will diminish spirit. It sees and understands and walks the truth in all matters. It considers all other matters to not be of importance. If you become offended, that is actually your conditioned self that's reacting to it. The authentic self does not react. Instead, it responds. And there is a clear difference between the two. For instance, I had a friend who is Black, and when I first met him, he told me that I was stupid because I had a Southern accent. And at first, my conditioned self became kind of angry. But instead of reacting, I took a step back and thought about the issue before me. And with a straight face, I replied with, where I come from, all Black people eat fried chicken and watermelon. Do you? And he took a step back and looked at me. And he said no, that he was allergic to chicken and hated watermelon. And so I said, so that means that you're not black. Because, see, you believe I'm stupid because of my Southern accent, and you believe that statement to be true. So if that statement is true, then all black people eat fried chicken and watermelon. And since you're neither, then you're not black. So this puts you in a predicament about your skin because your skin looks black, but the statement, it says that you're not. So that means you need to change your color. So I don't know what Michael Jackson did, but you need to do something. And it took this man a few minutes to realize I was just pulling his leg and being as utterly ridiculous as he was. And when he finally realized what he was doing, he apologized to me. And we have been very good friends ever since. You know, I look back on that and I could have reacted, and meaning that I could have gotten mad and created a whole, fit show. And if I did that, then we would have never been friends. But however, I chose to respond and not react. So now I have a good friend and not an enemy. So let's talk about fear. Oh, fear. President Franklin Roosevelt stated, and quote, "The only thing to fear is fear itself," unquote. And this is very true. So what is fear? So, I wanted to know that. So I define fear in Google search engine, and you will find many different definitions. And the best one, I believe, is, quote, "an emotion induced by perceived danger or threat, which causes psychological changes and ultimately behavior changes," unquote. The original purpose for fear was to keep us safe from physical harm. And fear is both a biological response and an emotional response as well. For fear contains many triggers, and it's not really an enjoyable emotion. It causes us to think things that it causes us to do things that harm us in a way that we do not realize. I discovered an acronym for fear, which stands for false evidence appearing real. And when it comes to the conditional self, the definition of fear fits completely because the conditioned self often uses fear. And there are things out there that you should be afraid of and use caution. However, the conditioned self will not tell you the difference. And even at times, it will use logic to be able to defend it. So, for instance, looking both ways before you cross the street is good because it is a safety measure. So that is the authentic self. But if let's say you want to become a writer and you write all the time. However, you do not allow anybody to read it and you keep telling yourself you're not a writer. Well, the conditioned self is using fear to keep your authentic self from emerging. How are you going to be that famous writer if you will not allow anyone to see what you wrote and you keep telling yourself, "I'm not a writer"? What's the worst that can actually happen? Someone doesn't like your writing. That's okay. Everybody has a different opinion about something. You will not physically die from somebody telling you that they didn't like what you wrote. But then again, there's that other part of it. What about if somebody does like what you write? What about if there's a lot more people that love what you write? You got to take that chance. You got to take that wisdom off of faith. Fear traps us in the past and it keeps us unable to move forward. And this is what the conditioned self thrives on. If you do not act, how can your authentic self emerge and grow? Because fear, it needs fuel to feed on. Don't provide it. We fight fear with applied knowledge. Allow yourself to discover the truth behind the false evidence appearing real. So what we need to do is we need to do the transformation of the phoenix. And from the Egyptians to the Greeks to the Chinese, the phoenix is a mystical bird that is in virtually every culture. It's a bird to say being as big as an eagle, and it lives for 500 years. It appears for its death and transformation by building a nest full of enormous branches and spices. And then it sets it on fire and it embraces the flames as it is consumed. And when the flames, kind of die out, the baby phoenix just rises from the ashes. So what can we learn from this magnificent, flamboyant bird? The phoenix teaches us life, death, and transformation. It teaches us how to bounce back after tragic events occur. It teaches us resilience and moving forward. This bird is an absolute perfect example of the soul. For no matter what comes across our path, we will get through it and live to become better people than we were when we arrived. The phoenix is a bird of spirit, for the human soul is damn near impossible to break or destroy. Transformation, it rarely comes when we want it to, okay, or in the form we want it to. When it usually comes, it's sloppy, messy, and incredibly upsetting. Most people resist change, so they do everything to avoid it or just block it out completely. This is the conditioned self at work. World Financial Group Chris Fuller stated, "What you resist will continue to exist," unquote. Transformation is the emergence of the authentic self. The phoenix teaches us to embrace that transformation and know that this is not the end. There is always something on the other side. And the phoenix teaches us that we are alchemists of our own lives, and our choices will not always appear the way that they should appear that we think. What you see may be an illusion, and you must keep looking deeper into the fire to discover the truth behind the illusion. Do not be afraid to jump in and embrace the fire to obtain your truth, for your truth will emerge from the ashes to make you a stronger, better model than you were before. Embracing the flames, shed the things that no longer are used to you. Proudly show people your new flamboyant 2.0 authentic self. The conditioned self is always present in the background. It is the little green monster that is constantly whispering everything in our ear. Entrepreneur and pastor Greg Catt once said, "Your outer ear hears everything, but your inner ear is what you say to yourself." This goes back to, what do you actually believe about yourself? So I'm going to challenge you. Every time you have a negative thought, stop yourself. Turn it into a positive thought and say that aloud. For when you are starting to monitor your thoughts, you'll really be surprised how many negative thoughts you have. They say it takes 30 days to create a new habit. And for some people, this is longer. But our co-founder of Witch School, Sir Ed Hubbard, said, and I quote, "You are the broker of your own experiences and intentions," unquote. Changing those thoughts into a positive and saying it aloud teaches you to think positive thoughts. Remember, our options are not always in front of us. At times, they may be to the side, behind, above, underneath, or they may even be beyond what we're seeing. So make sure you look for all those places for your options and your answers. The authentic self, it never takes any excuses. And to it, everything is an excuse. Living as the authentic self, you must get comfort being uncomfortable. So I'm going to say it again. You need to be comfortable being uncomfortable. You ask, seek, and find the answers to your deep questions that only produce more deeper questions. You question everything, for your foundation is cracked. And do not be afraid to just destroy it completely, because you want to make a more powerful, stable foundation in your spirituality. because that is what is going to get you through the transformation, your spiritual foundation. The sooner you accept that each person, including yourself, is a soul, the better off you will be. As such, each of us is a divine being packed with unlimited possibilities and immense power. Author Christian Rogers said, quote, "I've died 1,000 deaths, each time reinventing myself brighter, stronger, and purer than before. For the midst of destruction, I become the creator of, from the midst of destruction, I become the creator of myself. And from the midst of darkness, I become my own source of light." So what does this have to do with authentic leadership? Well, let's define authentic leadership. Authentic leaders are positive people with truthful self-concepts who promote openness and build honest, transparent relationships with their followers while valuing their input, and they build that on an ethical foundation. You know, in order to be an authentic leader, the authentic self must emerge. And emerging the authentic self depends a lot on faith. You know, faith can be anyone or anything that you have complete confidence in. Faith believes in endless possibilities. Faith requires you to take a risk. Faith allows you to see opportunities that a person without faith cannot see. Faith allows you to be your soulful self. Leadership is made up of different levels, but everybody needs to do the first level, which the first level is leading yourself, meaning to hold yourself accountable, responsible for your thoughts, words, and actions. It holds you accountable to your own personal set of values, goals, and beliefs. You act with integrity, especially when nobody's looking or when you don't believe anybody's going to find out. You make sure you get to work on time. You're responsible on how you look at the world. You continue to change, grow, and personally develop. So how can we accomplish this? Number one, leading oneself requires clarity. So you have to be aware of yourself at your truest core. Number two, it requires you to act and think with integrity of yourself and of others. And number three, you must have courage to act according to your true deep down beliefs of your authentic self. Each one of these are not easy, for if they were easy, everybody would do them. And the conditioned self will emerge in yourself and other people. So these people will do everything they can to stop you. So when this happens, remember it is their conditioned selves that are acting because they see in you what they are afraid to accomplish. And they are afraid of losing you because you will outgrow them. And, you know, that's okay to outgrow somebody. It only means that you have served your purpose. You know, I tell people you must surround yourself with people who are willing to support you and continue to challenge you. Spirit wants us to evolve into better people than what we were when we arrived. The head of Pinnacle Leadership Development, Eric Olson, said, quote, "Leadership is the capacity to translate vision into reality." So as a leader, you must have a vision, and that vision must include everyone so they can get behind you and support you. As Greg Kapp said, quote, "Speak from the heart and you cannot make a mistake," unquote. So as the founder and head of Ever Moving We Rise Witness Shrine, my vision is this: we will become authentic selves that we were meant to be. And through our authentic leadership program, we will teach and support others, for we recognize that the Ever Moving We Rise Witness Shrine is a living organism consistent of its members, community, and Mother Earth. We will rise to become the spiritual, authentic leaders, leading a generation of innovators and leading our tradition, becoming the role models that other spiritual traditions will envy and follow. For we will continue to live up to our name, ever moving, we rise. And I will leave you with a poem. It's one of my favorite poems from Maya Angelou called Still I Rise. And this is from her book, And Still I Rise, a book of poems. And it is the basis for the ever moving We Rise Witten Shrine. So as I read this, imagine your own phoenix rising from the ashes, emerging your authentic self. So still I rise. You may write down in history with your bitter, twisted lies. You may tread me in the very dirt, and still I rise. Does my sassiness upset you? Why are you beset with gloom? 'Cause I walk, I've got oil wells pumping in my living room, just like the moons and the suns, with the certainty of tides, just like hope's springs ringing high. Still, I rise. Did you want to see me broken? Bow my head and lowered eyes, shoulders falling down like teardrops, weakened by soulful cries? My haughtiness offend you? Don't you take it awful hard, 'cause I laugh like I got gold mines digging in my backyard. You may shoot me with your words. You may cut me with your eyes. You may kill me with your hatefulness. But still, like air, I rise. Does my sexiness upset you? Does it come as a surprise that I dance like I got diamonds at the meeting of my thighs? Out of the huts of history's shame, I rise. From a past that's rooted in pain, I rise. I'm the black ocean, leaping and wide. Willing and swelling, I bear in the tide. Leaving behind nights of terror and fear, I rise. Into the daybreak that wondrously clear, I rise. Bringing the gifts that my ancestors gave, I am the dream and the hope of the slave. I rise, I rise, I rise.
Thank you so much, Reverend Nikki.
We can't hear you, Ebony.
Can you hear me?
You gotta put yourself.
Am I better? Is that better? Can you hear me now?
I can't hear you.
How about now?
Okay, now we can hear you.
Okay. All right. Sorry about that. Thank you so much. If anyone has any questions, feel free to put them in the chat room. And I'm also looking on Facebook. So if you're on Facebook, go ahead and ask away.
Anybody?
Anybody got a question? I can start. I do actually have a question.
Okay.
So what would you say would be the most important first step someone would take in finding their authentic self?
Oh, that's a good question. That's a real good question. It has to do with your beliefs, okay? Because we all start at different levels. And what I would recommend is what you need to do is you need to start questioning your faith, okay? If you were told to believe in something, or did you choose it on your own? There's your big question of anything that you believe. If somebody told you to believe it, does it still serve you? If it still serves you, then you need to answer the question, why does it still serve me? If it doesn't serve you, then you need to take that belief out and replace it with a belief that actually does serve you. Now, this is going to be really hard for a lot of people because you have to be and I mean you have to be, brutally honest with yourself. And if you're not, then starting the journey to emerge the authentic self is going to be pointless, because you're always going to wind up back at that same point in the same journey.
All right. That was a good answer. Thank you. So we have another question in chat. Can you talk about ways our higher selves can help us work with our authentic selves?
Oh, another good one. Well, when it comes to our higher selves are the ones that really truly guide us to become our authentic selves. They're the ones that are spirits, and they connect us with spirit. So, like I said, everybody is a soul, and as a soul, you are divine, period. And so that's what the authentic self is. It becomes that way. So when you talk to your higher self, which is your true divine part, it can give you steps for you to be able to take in order for your authentic self to emerge. And a lot of times, this is what I want to tell you about your higher self. It's not going to lie to you. It's going to tell you what you need to know. And for some people, they're not ready to hear that. But with your higher self, it doesn't care whether you're ready for it or whether you're not. It's still going to tell you what you need to know, what your next steps will be. And it's the part of you that really, truly supports you. So I recommend that you spend as much time talking to your higher self as possible, because you're going to get a lot of that positive, loving energy. And you need to be able to love yourself so the authentic self can emerge.
All right. That was a great question. So I've got several questions here on Facebook. Ooh, these are really good questions. Okay, so it's a collection of questions.
Okay.
What made you question your faith, and what brought you to this path? What was your background before? Have you ever personally been questioned about your beliefs? And if you were by conventionalists about your beliefs, how did you handle it on the spot?
Okay, now let's break down that question, like 80 questions together.
Yeah, I just wanted to give you an idea of where it was going.
Okay, so what was the first one?
The first one is, what made you question your faith, and what brought you to this path?
Okay. There were several things that made me question my faith throughout the years. But my major mind shift was back when I went to California. See, what happened was I was valedictorian of my class, and I wanted to pursue my dream. I apologize, my dogs. And I went to pursue my dream. So I literally quit my job, dropped everything, got onto a plane, and went over to California. And I didn't really have a whole lot of an idea about how much it was, really anything. I didn't really have that much of an idea. I just had a little bit of money in my checking account, and I went over. And when I went over there, my sole thing was I was going to become a producer. I was going to do what I wanted to. And I ended up coming across, first of all, the culture shock. That was the major thing right there. Because where I came from, when it came to being different than Christianity, you didn't say anything. You just really, truly hushed. That was it. You did not come out of the closet. But when I went over there, my friend Oberon Zell Ravenheart, I went to one of his parties. And the first thing he did was he introduced me as a professor of grade school wizardry. And I remember freezing. He did this right in public, and I remember freezing and wanting to run so bad because of the way that I grew up, but everybody started being okay with that. And so I ended having to learn that it's okay being who I am, that I'm not supposed to be somebody different. And throughout that entire time, I was having a whole lot of problems coming in. I couldn't find a job. It wasn't that I wasn't looking for one. I could find them, but I had major competition from people who were like 10 years younger than me. And on top of that, I kept getting into a variety of car wrecks. It was always one thing after another. And finally, I got to the point where I could not afford a place to live. And I was working a part-time job with PetSmart. And I just could not afford it. Didn't matter. I just couldn't afford it. And so I ended up living in my car for a good almost a year to do that. And when that happens, when you believe, see, I was raised, you went to school, you got good grades, you get the job, everybody wants to come and get you because you got the good grades, you went above and beyond. Everybody wants you. That is not true. And that was one of my major things that I was struggling against. And when I ended up homeless, and like I said, I was homeless for several months, I found out that I had to figure out other ways of getting basic needs. Like, for example, I didn't have a bathroom I could go to. So I had to use the public restrooms. And I would be washing my hair in the sink. I would change my dress, everything like that in a public bathroom. And I kept getting run out of these public bathrooms because people don't want to see homeless people taking care of themselves in the bathroom. Don't ask me why. They just and I ended up going through, I was really ashamed for what happened to me because I was always raised to where you took care of yourself, okay? You didn't go outside the family. You took care of yourself. And I got to the point I just couldn't take care of myself. I was in a land I wasn't really knowledgeable about. And I finally had to just shred my pride and start asking for help and changing my point of view that instead of everybody being out against me, that people were actually out to help me. And it was the way that I looked at things. And once I realized that, things started getting a lot better. I ended up having a place to live. I had a decent job. Things were getting so much better. And you know what? When that mind shift happened, it was like this big, enormous weight had been lifted off of me because I had been angry for over 20 years. And there was a lot of various things, a lot of trauma that I had been through that I was still upset about, but all of that literally vanished. And when that happened, like I said, things started getting a lot better and they are progressing now. So now I can be hit with virtually anything. And what I do is I stop myself and I respond to it. I don't react to it. I respond to it. So I believe I've answered like 3 questions there.
I'd say so. I'd say you're pretty close there. So I guess the one other question was let me see. Somebody has quite a question here. Okay, so I'm going to read this paragraph to you. The question's at the top, and she's got a little example here. Yeah. Curious, is this problematic when one is very open about beliefs while still not being super overt that I am Wiccan? For example, when Christians ask for prayers or talk about God's plan, I'm okay with those things since I do believe in prayer and goddesses, and just speak within their lens while protecting my minority status. I literally have only told the chaplain my path, and only so if she came across other pagans, she had resource to support them better. I don't feel like I'm being fake, but listening to you, it made me wonder. I'm hoping it's not bad because I don't know that I feel safe to be fully out.
Oh, that I truly understand. The thing about it is, when it comes to faith and it comes to other faiths, like, for example, I do have a spiritual coaching that I do. And to me, I take people of all faiths because it does not matter what I believe. Okay. That doesn't matter. I am helping you. What is between you and your own personal deity, God, whatever you have faith in, that is your business. What my concern is how to be able to help you embrace that, make that stronger. That is what my concern is. So when people start talking to me, I have a lot of people around me talking about Christianity and stuff like that. And I used to really, really feel kind of nervous or upset or, stuff like that. I don't do that anymore because I realize it's their authentic self. It's their conditional selves that are speaking. Okay. Because people, they don't want to go deep into what they believe. So they believe it because they were raised that way. They don't want to question it. When it comes to you, you need to be concerned about, number one, what is safe for you. Okay. You may be in an area where if somebody believes in a different religion, that they are discriminated against or their family will be harmed. And that still does happen. Okay. Don't think it doesn't happen anymore. It still does. Then that's okay. But you need to ask yourself, is this a safety issue? Or is this the conditional self telling me this? Because I'm back and I'm in the middle of a Bible Belt. And my mom, who, when she found out that I was a witch, which that's another story, she was amazing. She was very supportive. I didn't think she would be, but she really was supportive. And now people know who I am. They don't necessarily have to understand that. And when people tell you this, they come and they tell you, like, for example, my ex-husband is the one that told my mother, and he told my mom that me and my friends, we were going up into the mountains of North Carolina, and we were getting naked and dancing around a big bonfire with the devil, having sex with him, and selling our souls. That's what he told my mother. Okay. You have to look at life with kind of a sense of humor and grin when people say that, because that is just outrageous. But okay. Because like I said in my speech, sometimes you have to be ridiculous to get the point across about how ridiculous they're being. And when you do that, a lot of times people were like, I never thought of it in that manner. But then again, you have those that have their conditioned selves, and it's going to be the conditioned self all the time. It's going to argue with you. Those just don't waste your time on. Period. Say thank you for, blah, 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 blah. Have a wonderful day. And be really nice about it, because the nicer you are, the more likely the person is going to stop and they're going to look at themselves, because what they want to do is they want a reaction from you. Like with my ex-husband, if I had reacted like, oh my God, no, that can't be true, it would have been a totally different story versus me turning around and kind of laughing when my mother told me this, because it made the blow. And when you can't, use humor for the icebreaker every time. Smile always, because people will think you're always in control, even when things are totally out of control. So I'm not really sure if I explained that correctly or not, but you're not really being fake with yourself, okay? Because you have to think about outside forces as well. But when it comes to you And you when you're alone and it's just you have to be very true to yourself. I hope that answers your question.
All right. Do we have any other questions? Anybody? Oh, Lady Jen says thank you.
Oh, you're welcome. You're welcome. I'm really glad to be able to be here and and just talk with you about this, because I believe the one reason why I wanted to have this conference was because of pagan leadership. I was getting kind of concerned about pagan leadership, because when people think, well, you're a pagan, that means you just go your separate ways and you don't blend in with anybody. But when it comes to our tradition, we've learned to cooperate and to blend in. And you can still be able to blend in and make the difference and the changes while you're in there. Just for example, I remember when I first started, the fact that I'm called a reverend. I remember when I was 18 years old and it was career day. And me and my friends, we went into our gymnasium and we talked to one of the colleges that was in Spartanburg. Presbyterian College is what it was. And at the time, I wanted to be in criminal justice. And of course, they didn't have a criminal justice program. And so the guy told me, he says, well, you know what? Instead of being in criminal justice, why don't you be a priest? And I remember sitting there and just laughing about that, because I'm like, I am not a goody two shoes. There's no way in the world I'm going to be a goody two shoes. And at the time, I was an atheist. And so, but you fast forward that to like 20 plus years later, and here I am. I'm a reverend, and I have a church, and but it's not Christianity. It's still, but it's in my religion, and I just keep, every time I think about it, I just keep laughing about that, because it was just so ridiculous at the time.
All right. I don't think there's any other questions. So thank you, Lady Nikki, for taking time to speak with us. We appreciate your knowledge and your wisdom you bestowed upon us today. May you continue to change your life and the lives of others. Blessed be.
Blessed be, and thank you so much.
All right, we are going to take about another 15-minute break. Up next is a man who is all about keeping it real, Lord Reverend Phoenix Coffin Williams. Our 2020 Authentic Leadership Conference was brought to you by Evermoving We Rise with Tan Shrine and the Correllian Tradition. Please find it in your hearts to provide our sponsors with your generous donation. We'll be right back.
Live from Forest City, North Carolina, it's the 2020 Authentic Leadership Conference, sponsored by the Karelian Nativist Tradition and the ever-moving We Rise Shrine. I am your host, Lady Reverend Nikki Kirby, and our co-host is Reverend Ebony Nash. So we're back, and we ask that you share this broadcast with others so everyone will be able to have the opportunity to gain this insightful knowledge. So, Ebony, tell me a nugget from what I was saying.
Well, I would have to say that the biggest thing that I appreciated you talking about was fear, which is something that even through this whole process of us working together on this conference, we've talked about. And so it really hit home for me because I've struggled with that, but I finally got to a point of beginning to break that barrier of, okay, what I'm conditioned to know and what I know is not authentic to me and what I should be doing, and breaking over that fear of, okay, what is anybody going to think once I'm actually like, hey, this is me. Is this okay? It doesn't matter if it's okay. It's okay for me, and that's all that matters at this point. So it's just touching on that, and it was kind of like a reminder, and I appreciated that.
Well, you're welcome, because fear is a very, very big thing when it comes to trying to emerge the authentic self and actually trying to change anything. So yes, it is, something that's really, really big. So thank you, Ebony, for that. I appreciate that so much. So are we ready for our next speaker? Please save your questions for after our speaker presents. So now this next gentleman I am introducing is not afraid to ask the hard questions and venture into the depths of the unknown. He knew his life would not be easy, but his drive and motivation modeled him into the man he is today. And as a role model, he has been described as, quote, he lives and breathes his magical practice and inspires growth and change, unquote. He is known to share various videos of his magical workings and readings within our tradition's various Facebook groups. He possesses a bachelor's degree in psychology and practices as a therapist, executive coach, and a consultant at his own private mental health firm. He received his third degree in June of 2014 and is the head of the Temple of Holistic Knowledge in Buffalo, New York. As an active advocate on social and political issues relating to mental health and wellness, he is about standing up for the little guy. So let's put your hands together for a man with a big heart and all about keeping it real. I am delighted to introduce our archpriest of the Karelian Nativist Tradition, Lord Reverend Phoenix Coffin Williams. Where is he?
Jump up, jump up, jump up, yeah. Be a fight, everybody thumbs up, yeah. Already bar, let's bring your thumbs up, yeah. I'm gonna really back a runs up. Jump up, jump up, yeah. Be a fight, everybody thumbs up, yeah. Already bar, let's bring your thumbs up, yeah. I'm gonna really back.
Hey folks, how are you doing? This is Reverend Phoenix, and I'm coming to you from the currently raining but remarkably beautiful Buffalo, New York. And I'm super delighted to be here presenting at this conference. So thank you, Reverend Nikki, for the opportunity to be here. I'm super excited to be presenting alongside Lord Don and Lady Steph and yourself. So again, thank you for that opportunity. So part of my work in practicing mental health, community wellness, and doing some consulting for some community organizations and other folks who want to craft their organizations into things that can do real good in the community. And so part of what I do with them in coaching and in working together is I teach them about the servant leadership model. The servant leadership model is an actual model that has been used to showcase or demonstrate or to help prompt people to think about what qualities or characteristics make up a really good leader. One of the reasons that I love the servant leadership model is because it mirrors beautifully our maxim, to rise you must fall. So let me go ahead and get this situated, because there's something that I would like to show y'all. All right, so the servant leadership model, in my opinion, is one of the best embodiments of our belief to rise you must fall. It's very serious in this case, because the servant leadership model is a great demonstration of how doing things that really put our pride at jeopardy, or doing essential things without the expectation of glory, or for serving or loving our communities without the thought or expectation of that love's return, really actually helps us rise to become our truest and most authentic selves. So that's kind of what I'll be talking about for the next couple of minutes. So you can expect to learn some of where the servant leadership model originated from. You can expect to learn the characters and principles of the servant leadership model. You'll be able to learn about some applications, and I'll talk to you about one of the programs me and my temple developed that's really close to my heart. That is an example of the servant leadership model. We'll talk about how some socialization affects leadership effectiveness. So this is where we'll get to those hard, dark shadow work questions. So we'll talk about the role of racism or sexism or homophobia or transphobia or xenophobia on your effectiveness as a leader, right? How do these things truncate your message? How do these things prevent you from being super effective in your role? Or how do these things even prevent you from becoming a leader to begin with? And we will talk about ways to kind of recover from that invalidation. And we'll talk about ways that people can recognize when they are participating in ways that are invalidating the experiences of other people. Because what I will be talking about, which will be a central theme, is the idea of community building, which is something that is super important to me in my personal ministry, is my ability to impact my community with, I don't want to call them miracles, but by spreading the abundance that is given so freely into my life by the spirits that I serve, I seek to pass it on into the community. And so the issue of community service, building community, and social justice really fall into line with my own personal ministry. And I will be talking to you about how the servant leadership model kind of dovetails into that. So the servant leadership model began in 1970 with this dude named Robert K. Greenleaf. He wrote a paper called The Servant as Leader. The way that this paper describes the servant leader, it is quite literally identical to the way that many of us in the clergy identified first hearing the call to ministry, or the call to serve spirit, or the call to build a very deep, personal, meaningful relationship with God. So the servant leader, just like the member of clergy, is a servant first. It starts with this natural feeling. Sometimes we talk about it in terms of a call. Sometimes we recognize that our life is very empty or meaningless without God. And recognizing the patterns that come along with that move us into seeking that deeper relationship, which ends up being a relationship of joy and servitude. So the servant leader seeks to serve first. And any of us who are seeking to be servant leaders, we can exemplify the serve first concept by seeking out chores and tasks and responsibilities without actually having to be assigned to them by people that we perceive as leaders, right? So that is one of the first steps in attaining levels of leadership through the servant leadership model, is to find a task or a chore that is not being accomplished, accomplish it, without being asked or told. From that point on, the movement into leadership role can have a tendency to be a little bit seamless. So first, you find a task that is not being completed and you complete it. Then someone asks a question about the task that you've completed, and someone who knows that you've completed the task now designates you, maybe arbitrarily, maybe not, as the point person for said task. But now if anyone wants to know anything about said task, they ask you. And you have already moved into a leadership role just by doing something that no one else was doing, but still had to be done anyway. From the moment of deciding that you are going to fill a role or fill a need that needs to be met, there starts to manifest this sense of pride in the role. So you start off as the servant doing the thing, completing the chore, finishing the task, and then as appreciation for your role starts to build, your pride in the task also starts to build, right? So you want to make sure that you are doing this task the best that you can. And in recognition for that, people start to acknowledge you as someone who can be trusted to do said thing. One of the important things to keep in mind here is that the servant leader's focus is primarily on the growth, the development, the well-being, the transformation of a community as a whole. So the things that the servant leader does is for the betterment of everybody, not just a large few, right? So there's more to being a good servant leader than working for people who vote for you or working for people who share perspectives as you, right? The servant leader is actually able to accommodate everyone who is looking to them for leadership, no matter what the task at hand may be. Following the work of Greenleaf, Larry C. Spears in 2010 was able to deduce 10 characteristics that servant leaders possessed and was able to provide some information about them so that folks could start to duplicate these characteristics more easily. And so these characteristics are listening, empathy, healing, awareness, persuasion, conceptualization, foresight, stewardship, commitment to growth of the people, building community. So listening involves hearing the stories and the perspectives of others. Listening is more than just knowing what happened or hearing people talk to you about what happened. Listening is actually a very active skill. Listening involves more than just hearing what people are saying, but also understanding the implications for what you are being told. The ability to listen to the thoughts, the opinions, the suggestions, thoughts about your own shortcomings, the ability to be able to listen to the praise that's coming to you and criticisms as well, all fall under that category of listening. And this is a skill that must be strengthened when taking on the servant leadership approach. The next characteristic is empathy. And so as magical, pagan, Wiccan clergy, we recognize that empathy is everywhere, right? We acknowledge that everyone to a degree is an empath. We recognize to a degree that humans have the capacity at baseline to recognize the emotions that other human beings are feeling. We also, to a degree, believe that we can recognize the emotionality of other animals based on certain forms of communication, right? We believe we know when our puppies are sad or happy. We believe to know when a monkey or an orangutan or something like that is, experiencing some form of grief. We are able to recognize these experiences in other people. And so this idea of empathy is essential. it is essential to be able to recognize the feelings that are related to what's being shared. Healing is the third characteristic that was identified by Spears. And this really just means creating the conditions for healing to occur. So we don't necessarily, as servant leaders, have to heal. Depending on where you fall on the belief about how healing occurs anyway, you might not believe that people are healers at all, that all we can do is create conditions for healing to occur. But either way, in accordance with the servant leadership model, the healing characteristic means that we are able to create conditions for healing to occur. And this could be by solving conflicts. This could be by being a first responder for injuries, first aid certifications and whatnot. But quite literally and frequently, there is the need and the component for healing to occur. So that is a foundational principle of the servant leadership model. Awareness is the fourth characteristic. And so awareness is the ability to recognize tasks that need to be completed. It's also the ability to recognize the strengths that the people on your team possess. So being able to recognize who in your temple or who in your coven or who in your crew is best suited to do what work, and also help them become comfortable in recognizing that genius that resides within them. So when I think about servant leaders in my life or people who encourage me to seek out my own genius, I think about my sister Alyssa and my sister Lori. So at this point, I cannot tell if my artwork is getting better or if those two will just put anything I make on the refrigerator. That is kind of the level of awareness that has to go into the way that you interact with people who are on your team, people who are serving in your temple or in your shrine, right? You want to encourage them at all costs to do the things that they show an interest in, to do things that they show a talent for. So that means you have to be aware of these details about them as well. And so if you want to remember this easier, you can call it strengths-based awareness. Next up, persuasion. It's the ability to get folks to recognize your point of view as being the best point of view of all point of views considered. The servant leader considers all perspectives. That's part of what makes a servant leader so persuasive, is the fact that they do spend time really looking at every perspective presented, allowing everyone to be heard, validating feelings, validating thoughts, and then helping people understand or recognize why one way of acting or being or proceeding is the best for the entire group or team. Now, if anybody is at the point where they are persuading people to think about their perspective or to think about what an entire group should do, also recognize that at this point, everyone has a right to choose whether or not to be a part of your group or your team. So if you are not that persuasive, if you have not done a good enough job at listening to everybody, if you've not done a good enough job at becoming aware of the strengths of the folks who are working with you, if you've not done a good enough job at listening or being empathic, you might start to notice that when you try to persuade the folks that are working with you, if they start to leave, if they start to exercise their power of choice in getting away from you, then perhaps you've got to work on those other skills, right? So that's kind of like this inside check into these characteristics, is that, you know, you'll start to notice the shortcomings, or you'll start to notice your inadequacy or your lack of attention to these characteristics when your goal or your dream or your foundations start to kind of crumble. Because at the heart of this model, again, is the community that you're serving and the folks who are seeking to work for you. Up next is conceptualization. Conceptualization is the ability to generate a dream or a vision for the team to strive for. So conceptualization is your ability to have an idea and get other folks to buy into it and want to be a part of it. and kind of see it the way that you see it. And you see that this goes right along with the idea of persuasion. Foresight, the ability to anticipate or foreshadow outcomes, also the ability to kind of anticipate or recognize when things might go poorly because of other bad decisions or because of other missteps or miscalculations. So there is an extreme, almost radical lack of judgment when it comes to the servant leadership approach, because if you are a servant, then you are not necessarily in a place to judge other people for their choices. If you have been practicing empathy and listening, then you are able to understand why certain choices are made and maybe how these choices were meant to serve the greater goal of the group. And at that point, you can use other skills like awareness and persuasion to implement other things that are more helpful or more functional. So foresight works with other skills in helping to kind of reinforce the foundation that is implemented by the servant leader. The concept of stewardship as a characteristic is quite frankly, or very literally, just serving the needs of other people, putting the needs of others first. And as a member of the clergy, I do expect that other members of the clergy do take their perspective that other folks' needs are a part of the ministry, are a part of the oath that we take when we enter the clergy. So I do believe that there is this general expectation of stewardship when you take public office as a priest or a priestess or member of clergy. Commitment to the growth of the team or growth of the people recognizes that the folks who are coming to be with us, the folks who are supporting our vision, the folks that we are serving and leading simultaneously have value that is far greater than any role or job that they could perform for us, right? So we are actively making sure that we are not reducing people to the work that they can do. Essential to the servant leadership model. And then the last characteristic that I kind of talk about within the context of the lens for the entire work that we do as clergy is building community. And so building community can be very formal, as having a shrine or a temple. It can be as formal as hosting ritual on a schedule, or hosting an event on a schedule, or it can be as informal as movie nights or game nights. If you are someone who is responsible for building community, one of the things that it's helpful for you to listen for or be aware of are the things that your community have in common outside of maybe that central thing that you are meeting for. So if you are a spell study group, or the example that I'm using in this presentation is if you are an American Sign Language study group, maybe you know that all of you like sushi. So instead of meeting for sign language one night, you meet for sushi instead. That is a way that you can actively build community and deepen your understanding and awareness of the people that you are working with. In this way, you are also building trust and building rapport, and potentially opening yourself up to a wider network of people who can talk about your skills and your abilities. The servant leadership approach has taken the traditional model of leadership and flipped it quite literally on its head. So traditional leaders habitually have been sought or looked to as those who are at the top of the hierarchy. They are the ones who make the final decisions, but also have most of the glory. It's something that everyone wants to obtain. If you can be the leader, it means you're the best. Traditional leadership models do have a tendency to use power and control to drive performance. So sometimes leadership models can be very punitive. So if you've ever worked at a job and your boss has had a leave alone zap kind of approach to managing you, so they leave you alone until you do something wrong, and then all of a sudden you find out who they are. It's in a traditional leadership style. Traditional leadership models measure success through output. And traditional leaders also personalize a lot. Performances may be related to leadership, or performance is related to someone's belief about the leader, right? So someone is performing bad because they don't like their boss, or someone is performing bad because someone else in the department or the agency or the temple got a role that, you know, someone else wanted, and the leader now is bearing the brunt of that. And sometimes that does happen. Sometimes that is the case. But traditional leaders have a tendency to look at things very punitively and have a hard time separating performance from their identity as a leader. The servant leadership approach flips that on its head and sees leadership as an opportunity to be of service to other people. So right away, you can already tell what kind of tasks and chores are the most readily available for people who are looking to serve others. Right? This means mopping floors. This means cleaning up garbage. This means helping serve food. This means hanging up decorations. This means making phone calls on behalf of the leader. This means setting up tables and bussing tables down. These are tasks that the servant leader recognizes needs to be done, but perhaps the leader of an event or group or situation might not have time to get to right away. Servant leaders share power and control to drive engagement. So what this means is that the servant leader will utilize delegation and opportunity to keep the team engaged and invested in the project or the goal. Success is measured through the strength of the relationship between teammates or temple mates or coven mates in the servant leadership model. Because when people trust each other and feel good about being around each other, creative juices can flow a whole lot better. Servant leaders listen and understand that a lot of times the things that we see or the things that happen as a result of being a leader don't necessarily have anything to do with us on a personal level. So there is a huge level of acceptance and a level of it is what it is when it comes to the servant leadership approach. So this particular infographic was taken from a servant leadership website, and that website is actually right down there at the bottom. So if anyone wants that, you can go ahead and write that down. You can go to that website because they do have a servant leadership online training that you can take for free to kind of get you a deeper introduction and some more creative ways to apply the servant leadership approach. So you can go ahead and take that. They do also offer a paid one if you wanted to like put your entire temple through it. I would suggest contacting the Blue Door, that's me, if you want a servant leadership training for your temple, because I will do that for y'all, especially if you are a Corellian temple or shrine. So there's that shameless plug. Examples of using stewardship or servant leadership to build community and impact change. So this slide right here is an article that I wrote about a project that my temple does every single year. It's called Helping Our Homeless. And it is a supply drive that we put together, that we collect, and we get participation from some of the other Wiccan covens or circles that are in the area. And so what we do is for a few months before the deep autumn and winter gets here is we collect bunches of items for our local homeless population. So these are socks, these are toothbrushes, sometimes these are tents and sleeping bags, these are hats, blankets. We've also done food, glove warmers, foot warmers, underwear, Tylenol, these kind of things that folks would have to have that would be helpful for them to have because they don't have a home. So we collect these things. They're all donated to us. They're donated to me and the coordinators of the event, one of which is, two of which who are a part of the temple, and then one of which is a part of another Wiccan circle. But we collect these items, sort them out, and then on a designated day, we go out by foot to the places that we know the homeless in the city of Buffalo congregate. So in this particular picture, this is all people who participated. No one in this picture is a recipient of this service because that's like it's a violation. And I'm not a huge fan of kind of social media-ing like humanitarian efforts. So this is a newsletter that was written specifically for illustration report. This is not something that is given like freely to everyone. So this specific program is being used as a stewardship program example, hopefully that folks would want to duplicate on their own. So what we do is we get these things, these items, these resources, and we distribute them by foot. And in the process, we also get to know the people that we are giving these items to. So I did change the name of one of the people that I wrote about. So in this particular article, I talk about a man named Charles, and I do remember him. We had a very interesting relationship one summer that involved us eating hot dogs off of a mini grill underneath a bridge in one of Buffalo's parks. But in so kind of doing this project, the helping our homeless and having a belief in the servant leadership model as intrinsic to my ministry, I was actually able to find out a lot more about this person and help them in a lot of other deeper, meaningful ways. And so this brings me to an interesting point that I was not actually prepared to talk about, but it is the power and authority that comes from having your initiation and your ministry founded in the Karelian Nativist Church or the Karelian Nativist tradition. We are absolutely empowered in these places that have legal freedom for clergy. We are able to freely activate and initiate programs like this to the extent of the law. So we can do this if you know that people in your family have things that they would love to get rid of, and you know that you have a population in your town or area that would love to receive some things, you can actually turn this into a temple program and make this a part of your life or make this a part of your journey. And this could be anything that you are passionate about, right? So this could be homework for students who are disadvantaged in other ways. This could be food. This could be access to care. There is no law that says that any head of a Karelian temple cannot register to help people with open enrollment for health insurance. We can do all these things as programs, and they fit the servant leadership model so appropriately. So if you remember, I told you earlier that a big part of my personal ministry is social justice and building community. So the applications of the servant leadership model definitely all have a lot to do with this, helping the homeless. And for those of you who want a Google search term, go ahead and search for yourselves liberation psychology. That would be something that might really pique your interest if you are wanting to learn more about expanding your ministry into these social programs and activism. So the servant leadership model absolutely requires that you get your self-esteem in check. So the servant leader has tasks a lot of times that are close to the ground or sometimes not even the most favored. So like I said, you could be mopping, you could be cleaning up other people's trash, you could be finding yourselves being the only one willing to clean out some toilets for the sake of a healthy festival or a healthy conference or a healthy event. You might find yourself having to drive a particular person back and forth to various places over the course of a long weekend. You might find yourself having to just do a lot of things as a servant leader. And if you are unable to forgive yourself for past mistakes, you might find your capacity for continuing on the path of leadership to be very, very hard. You can find yourself moving closer to this place of burnout or compassion fatigue. So when it comes to increasing your overall self-esteem and your fortitude for servant leadership or leadership in general, it's going to be super important for you to, one, forgive yourself for past mistakes, but also commit to not making them again. So after some reflection, after some shadow work, you recognize that you've made some mistakes, you've made some missteps, you apologize for them, you atone for them, you account for them, and then you make sure you don't do them again. Step one. Step two, focus on your positive attributes and show them to others. Show people what you're made of. Imposter syndrome is real. That's how you know you're talented. I'll just leave that right there. Step three, follow the example of successful people. Do the things that folks are doing if you find that you like what their life is like, or if you like what they are doing. If person A is doing X, Y, and Z, and they are having X, Y, and Z experiences, and you want that experience, follow the model. Also, typo, become a positive self-talker. Not a taker, a talker, my bad. So learn how to speak positively to yourself. This is not going to permanently stop the bombardment of negative thoughts that pop up when you are thrust into leadership positions or when you are kind of finding yourself being thought of as an expert in certain things, because after a while that will start to happen. Start to talk to yourself in a positive light. Again, focus on your positive attributes. Even if that doesn't make your sad or painful thoughts go away, it'll help keep you aware of the stuff that makes you a worthwhile individual, because we are worthwhile individuals. So there's this quote here that I really do like. Persons of high self-esteem are not driven to make themselves superior to others. They do not seek to prove their value by measuring themselves against a comparative standard. Their joy is being who they are, not being better than someone else. Contemplate that for a second, and contemplate that within the context of servant leadership and what it means to exalt your spirit through measuring yourself through the standards of your own worth and what your spirit wants to contribute to the world. So now we move to this place in the discussion that talks about pluralism and intersectionality. So pluralism is a condition or system in which two or more states or groups or principles or sources of authority exist. So in the United States of America in particular, we have this thing called American pluralism. And it's the belief that very many perspectives, worldviews, or paradigms are equally as valid. And it's kind of a social taboo to invalidate someone else's worldview, because sometimes invalidating someone's worldview also invalidates some pain and some suffering. So if we think about the intersections between our identities, right? So for me, as an example, I frequently identify as Black, gay, witch. Pluralism would say that all of those identities and all of those perspectives are valid. And so the decisions that I make on them or based on them can also be valid so long as they are functional for our society. Intersectionality talks about the interconnected nature of social categories. So this talks specifically about race and class and gender as they apply to any given group or individual. So intersectionality as a concept is something that the servant leader absolutely has to be aware of and has to be able to recognize. The reason why it's important, but also kind of evasive as a concept, is because intersectionality is kind of an attempt at making tangible some social constructs that have a tendency to be illusory. So I do have a video that discusses intersectionality that I do want y'all to watch.
Intersectionality is just a metaphor for understanding the ways that multiple forms of inequality or disadvantage sometimes compound themselves, and they create obstacles that often are not understood within conventional ways of thinking about anti-racism or feminism or whatever social justice advocacy structures we have. Intersectionality isn't so much a grand theory, it's a prism for understanding certain kinds of problems. African American girls are 6 times more likely to be suspended than white girls. That's probably a race and a gender problem. It's not just a race problem, it's not just a gender problem. So I encourage people to think about how the convergence of race stereotypes or gender stereotypes might actually play out in the classroom, between teachers and students, between students and other students, between students and administrators, and commit themselves to understanding that as a way of intervening and providing equal educational opportunity for all students, regardless of their identities. Identity isn't simply a self-contained unit, it is a relationship between people in history, people in communities, people in institutions. So schools do a good job when they understand that and when they commit themselves to curricular development, to opportunities in the school for all students to understand the histories that have brought us to this particular moment. You can't change outcomes without understanding how they've come about. So independent schools can take the lead on that to be responsive to their student populations and to the communities out of which the students come.
All right, so that video touched briefly on the concept of intersectionality and kind of becoming aware of it. Oh,
Challenge something scary.
sorry about that. Where was I? Oh yeah, so it talks about or helps further conceptualize the idea of intersectionality. The reason why it's important to recognize intersectionality and the role that it plays is because these issues of race, gender, class, xenophobia, heterosexism, all of these things have the ability to impact our ability to be effective leaders. No, that's not what I wanted. What? All right, here we go. So racism, sexism, heterosexism, xenophobia, homophobia, cultural appropriation, classism, partisanship, Islamophobia, hegemony, toxic masculinity, and patriarchy. These are things that can eclipse our ability to recognize the authentic leader in ourselves, our ability to participate in the servant leadership model, and these things also impact our ability to be effective in these roles, depending on where we sit in relationship to these things, right? So the isms, the phobias, when it comes to building communities, racism, sexism, heterosexism, so on and so forth, these are not things that just happen, right? These are things that people do. And so it's super important to recognize the relationship between your or our or my, in the case of me as a servant leader, it's super important to recognize the relationships between our identities and the communities that we are building. So me as a servant leader is a very specific things that I need to be thinking about as a man when it comes to aspects of sexism or heterosexism. As someone who does not participate in Abrahamic faiths, my relationship to Islamophobia is completely different from my neighbors. And as a servant leader and through the lens of stewardship, it might absolutely be my ministerial call to show other people how to get along with folks who are just trying to practice their own belief, right? Because me as a pagan, as a Wiccan, or as gay Black dude recognizes and empathizes with the pain that is at the heart of this Islamophobia. So using that empathy to build relationships, and recognizing that as like my relationship to any of these isms. So that is the last thing that I wanted to talk about as far as the servant leadership model goes. I am now open to any and all questions that y'all may have.
Thank you so much, Phoenix. If you have any questions, please put them in the chat, okay? We do have a question. It states, any advice on working with traditional leaders more effectively when you do not work that way?
So when it comes to working with traditional leaders, it's super important to make sure that you know enough about the tradition and the leaders to work with them respectfully first. So start with a do no harm attitude. Start with an attitude of collaboration. Start with an attitude of mutual understanding. Start with an attitude that perhaps traditional leaders might not see you as an equal. That's not something that we can always control. We can't control how other people see us. We can control our behavior. So when you are approaching traditional leaders and you are not used to working in that capacity, make sure you are coming from a place of respect first. That way you can be confident that at the end of the day, no matter what happens in any of your interactions with other people, the least that they can say about you is that you had a respectful demeanor, maybe a polite disposition, maintain your sense of assertiveness. Thank you for that question.
One of the things that I kind of like that you did was you listed, several different traits that a servant leader needs to have. And one of them that you listed was listening. So would that include active listening? And if so, how would you define that?
Yes, very good question. So it absolutely does include active listening. It also includes reflective listening. So active listening is maintaining that deep but not creepy eye contact. You're maybe nodding to let folks know, yep, I hear you, I hear what you're saying. The reflective listening part is when you say back to somebody what you heard them say, or you maybe repeat the question that you heard someone ask before you start to answer. So if I wanted to be demonstrating effective reflective listening, I would have said, so Reverend Nikki, it sounds like you want to talk about listening and active listening skills. Is that right? And you would say, yeah, that's right. Or no, not quite. And depending on that, I would go in and give you your answer. So 1, I hear you. 2, that's my response. And it's kind of like a pattern.
Awesome. And another thing that I really liked was when you brought up the homeless and how you actually was there with that man and you were doing the hot dogs and the way that you had your views and everything. You know what? When I remember when I was homeless, people didn't treat me as if I was a person. They treated me as if I was second class. Actually, they didn't even treat me as if I was second class. They treated me as if I was dirt, even though I was still dressed nice because I had my nice clothes. I was still going to work. These are people in California. You can have an office job and still be homeless. Actually, they have teachers that are still homeless. So I was really impressed when you told me the way that you were, treating this person. Is this something that came natural to you, or is it something that you had to kind of tell yourself, that this is a person and I need to hear or listen to what this person has to say because they matter?
So the inclination to be a helper or to move into the helping profession was something that was kind of intrinsic to my character. So I knew from a young age, like I wanted to be a therapist. And so the first Helping Our Homeless project that involved the character that I wrote about, and so I'm referring to him as a character because I don't want to give away any information about his identity other than what is already written. But so my interactions with this character and my work came because of a project that I needed to do for my master's program in clinical mental health counseling. And so specifically, I had to fulfill what was called a social justice competency, which means that I had to utilize my skills as a therapist, as a mental health counselor to meet the need of a specific community or population. And my population that I chose was homelessness. And I chose that population because I had seen that dude on the way to and from some business that I had to take care of every single day. So he was the example of something that I couldn't ignore. And he was also an example of a man that I didn't want to see in the mirror.
Yes, I can actually really understand that as well. You were saying that as a leader, you are supposed to be doing things like, for example, sweeping or cleaning things up or doing things like that. These are traits that a lot of people don't believe belongs to a leader, and they believe it's kind of beneath them. So could you kind of explain a little bit more why a leader, especially somebody who is getting into leadership, why they should be doing these type of things?
Mm-hmm. So a lot of these tasks or chores that are very service oriented, like sweeping and mopping floors, like breaking down and putting up events, really, I have found have been ways that people really start to learn and understand and experience my personal approach to work ethic. So that's one. Two, specifically thinking about to rise you must fall and our theology. In the myth, The Descent of Inanna, she attained her most desired goal by giving up everything that represented her status. And only once all those things were gone was she able to get her beloved back from the underworld. So if she is not too good to give up everything that makes her or marks her as a goddess to get what she's after, why am I too good to pick up a half-drinking cup of coffee, some Sprite lying around, a few napkins, get some glitter off the table, kind of do what I can to make the event, the service, the situation, the environment less stressful for the people who have bigger jobs that are super important for the time being. Just because I am an archpriest does not mean that I am too good to help someone with garbage, because an even archier priest has a very important job, right? I am not the big boss everywhere I go. And so if I want to still be helpful, if I want to still maintain relationships, then I'm going to support other people by doing the menial tasks that they can't get to.
Yes, it said in the chat, a good leader should never expect their people to do things that they're not willing to do. So, that is awesome, because I've personally always believed that, because I believe I'm not really any better than anybody else, that we all start at different levels, but we can all obtain, move up to the same level. So the last question would be, what would you say to somebody who is either, let's say they've just started a shrine, or they're thinking about starting a group, or they're thinking about doing something, whether it's formal or informal, and they're concerned about how the community is going to react?
That is a great question. And I really do believe that if you are interested in starting something for the community, make sure you are, one, doing something that does not exist, right? So do not waste your time duplicating a service that already exists in your community. If you want to do something and it's already being done, try to support that. If you want to find out what is missing from your community, ask folks around what's missing. What would you like to see? What do you wish was here that is not here? Are examples that you can ask some of the other folks in your community as far as what you can do to just insert yourself as someone who is providing something.
Awesome.
If you are, the other thing is, if you are in a community that doesn't support this, look for other resources or alternatives. I really think that if it is not in your heart or your mind or your blood to drive in hard change at the macro community level, then concentrate your efforts on where you can be the most effective. But if you are that type who's like, nope, you're going to respect me and you're going to respect my rights, then go for broke. Make your ministry about that aspect of things that you are passionate about. And that is how this dovetails into the idea of authentic leadership. Because when you are participating in things that you are passionate about and you are not competing with other people, because the desire to compete with other people for participation in your event, that's kind of an ego thing, right? Like trying to have a circle because you want to have a circle that's better than another circle is ego. So make sure you are doing something and you're not competing with other people. Make sure it's something that you are passionate about, and make sure that you are willing to be the absolute last person to walk out of your event or walk away from your idea or project and turn the lights out and lock the door.
Oh, that sounds great. I'm sorry about that, but thank you so much, Reverend Phoenix. I need somebody to mute this. I do apologize. There we go. Okay. I do apologize for that, but thank you so much, Reverend Phoenix. It has been an amazing discussion that you've had, and you've caused me to take a lot of notes myself. So I'd like to thank you for taking the time out to come and actually speaking to us today, because I know you're very, very busy. And you continue to make a difference in yourself and in others. All right? So
Thank you so much. Blessed be.
Have a good one.
You too.
So we're going to take about a 15-minute break. Up next is our Soulful Sea Priestess, Lady Reverend Stephanie Neal. Our 2020 Authentic Leadership Conference was brought to you by the ever-moving We Rise Witten Shrine and the Karelian Nativist tradition. Please find it in your hearts to provide our sponsors with your generous donation. And we'll be right back.